Mohammed Hosni El-Sayed Mubarak Sajed Mubarak. Mohammed Husni Saeed Mubarak, born 4 May 1928, is a former Egyptian military and political leader who served as the fourth president of Egypt from 1981 to 2011. Before he entered politics, Mubarak was a career officer in the Egyptian Air Force. He served as its commander from 1972 to 1975 and rose to the rank of Air Chief Marshal. Sometime in the 1950s, he returned to the Air Force Academy as an instructor, remaining there until early 1959. He was appointed Vice President of Egypt by President Anwar Sadat in 1975 and assumed the presidency on 14 October 1981. 8 days after Sadat's assassination, Mubarak's presidency lasted almost 30 years, making him Egypt's longest-serving ruler since Muhammad Ali Pasha, who ruled the country from 1805 to 1848. Mubarak stepped down after 18 days of demonstrations during the 2011 Egyptian Revolution. On the 11th of February 2011, Vice President Omar Suleiman announced that Mubarak had resigned as president and transferred authority to the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. On 13 April 2011, a prosecutor ordered Mubarak and both of his sons to be detained for 15 days of questioning about allegations of corruption and abuse of power. Mubarak was then ordered to stand trial on charges of negligence for failing to halt the killing of peaceful protesters during the revolution. These trials began on 3 August 2011. On 2 June 2012, an Egyptian court sentenced Mubarak to life imprisonment. After sentencing, he was reported to have suffered a series of health crises. On 13 January 2013, Egypt's Court of Cassation overturned Mubarak's sentence and ordered a retrial. On retrial, Mubarak and his sons were convicted on 9 May 2015 of corruption and given prison sentences. Mubarak is detained in a military hospital and his sons were freed 12 October 2015 by a Cairo court. Early life and Air Force career. Hosni Mubarak was born on 4 May 1928 in Kafr el-Masella, Monafia Governorate, Egypt. After leaving high school, he joined the Egyptian Military Academy where he received a bachelor's degree in military sciences in 1949. On 2 February 1949, he left the military academy and joined the Air Force Academy, gaining his commission as a pilot officer on 13 March 1950 and eventually receiving a bachelor's degree in aviation sciences. Mubarak served as an Egyptian Air Force officer in various formations and units. He spent 2 years in a Spitfire fighter squadron. Sometime in the 1950s, he returned to the Air Force Academy as an instructor, remaining there until early 1959. From February 1959 to June 1961, Mubarak undertook further training in the Soviet Union, attending a Soviet pilot training school in Moscow and another at Kant Air Base near Bishkek in the Kyrgyz Soviet Socialist Republic. Mubarak undertook training on the Ilyushin Il-28 and Tupolev Tu-16 jet bombers. In 1964 he gained a place at the Frunze Military Academy in Moscow. On his return to Egypt, he served as a wing commander. Then as a base commander, he commanded the Cairo West Air Base in October 1966, then briefly commanded the Beni Suef Air Base. In November 1967, Mubarak became the Air Force Academy's commander when he was credited with doubling the number of Air Force pilots and navigators during the pre-October War years. 2 years later, he became Chief of Staff for the Egyptian Air Force. In 1972, Mubarak became Commander of the Air Force and Egyptian Deputy Minister of Defense. On 6 October 1973, the Egyptian Air Force launched a surprise attack on Israeli soldiers on the east bank of the Suez Canal. Egyptian pilots hit 90% of their targets, making Mubarak a national hero. The next year he was promoted to Air Chief Marshal in recognition of service during the October War of 1973 against Israel. Mubarak was credited in some publications for Egypt's initial strong performance in the war. The Egyptian analyst Mohammed Hosni Mubarak said the Air Force played a mostly psychological role in the war, providing an inspirational site for the Egyptian ground troops who carried out the crossing of the Suez Canal, rather than for any military necessity. However, Mubarak's influence was also disputed by Shahdan el-Shazali, the daughter of the former Egyptian military chief of staff Saad el-Shazali. She said Mubarak exaggerated his role in the 1973 war. In an interview with the Egyptian independent newspaper Al-Masri Al-Yawm, el-Shazali said Mubarak altered documents to take credit from her father for the initial success of the Egyptian forces in 1973. She also said photographs pertaining to the discussions in the military command room were altered and Saad el-Shazali was erased and replaced with Mubarak. She stated she intends to take legal action. Vice President of Egypt. In April 1975, Sadat appointed Mubarak Vice President of Egypt. In this position, he took part in government consultations that dealt with the future disengagement of forces agreement with Israel. In September 1975, Mubarak went on a mission to Riyadh and Damascus to persuade the Saudi Arabian and Syrian governments to accept the disengagement agreement signed with the Israeli government, but was refused a meeting by the Syrian President Hafez al-Assad. During his meetings with the Saudi government, Mubarak developed a friendship with the nation's powerful Crown Prince Fahd, whom Sadat had refused to meet or contact and who was now seen as major player who could help mend the failing relationship between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Mubarak also developed friendships with several other important Arab figureheads, including Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud, Oman's Sultan Qaboos, Morocco's King Hassan II, and Sudan's President Jafar Namiri. Sadat also sent Mubarak to numerous meetings with foreign leaders outside the Arab world. Mubarak's political significance as vice president can be seen from a conversation held on 23 June 1975 between Foreign Minister Fahmy and U.S. Ambassador Herman Eltz. Fahmy told Eltz that Mubarak is, for the time being at least, likely to be a regular participant in all sensitive meetings, and he advised the ambassador not to antagonize Mubarak because he was Sadat's personal choice. Though supportive of Sadat's earlier efforts made to bring the Sinai Peninsula back into Egyptian control, Mubarak agreed with the views of various Arab figureheads and opposed the Camp David Accords for failing to address other issues relating to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Sadat even transferred his decision-making authority to Mubarak temporarily. At times he went on vacations. President of Egypt Mubarak was injured during the assassination of President Sadat in October 1981 by soldiers led by Lieutenant Khalid Islambouli. Following Sadat's death, Mubarak became the fourth president of Egypt and the chairman of the National Democratic Party. Egypt returned to the Arab League until Libya's suspension from the Arab League at the beginning of the Libyan civil war. Egypt was the only state in the history of the organization to have had its membership suspended because of President Sadat's peace treaty with Israel. In 1989, Egypt was readmitted as a full member and the League's headquarters were moved to their original location in Cairo. Gulf War of 1991. Egypt was a member of the Allied coalition during the 1991 Gulf War. Egyptian infantry were some of the first to land in Saudi Arabia to remove Iraqi forces from Kuwait. Egypt's participation in the war solidified its central role in the Arab world and brought financial benefits for the Egyptian government. Reports that sums of up to $500,000 per soldier were paid or debt forgiven were published in the news media. According to The Economist, the program worked like a charm. A textbook case says the International Monetary Fund In fact, luck was on Hosni Mubarak's side, when the US was hunting for a military alliance to force Iraq out of Kuwait. Egypt's president joined without hesitation. After the war, his reward was that America, the Arab states of the Persian Gulf, and Europe forgave Egypt around $20 billion of debt. Governing style throughout the 1980s, Mubarak increased the production of affordable housing, clothing, furniture, and medicine. He closely monitored his officials, he dismissed ministers at the first sign of wrongdoing and fined members of parliament for unnecessary absences. By the time he became president, Mubarak was one of a few Egyptian officials who refused to visit Israel and vowed to take a less enthusiastic approach to normalizing relations with the Israeli government. Mubarak was quick to deny that his policies would result in difficulties for Egyptian-Israeli dealings in the future. Egypt's heavy dependence on U.S. aid and its hopes for U.S. pressure on Israel for a Palestinian settlement continued under Mubarak. He quietly improved relations with the former Soviet Union. In 1987, Mubarak won an election to a second six-year term. In his early years in power, Mubarak expanded the Egyptian State Security Investigations Service and the Central Security Forces. According to Tarat Osman, the experience of seeing his predecessor assassinated right in front of him, and his lengthy military career, which was longer than those of Nasser or Sadat, may have instilled in him more focus and absorption with security than seemed the case with the latter heads of state. Mubarak sought advice and confidence not in leading ministers, senior advisors or leading intellectuals, but from his security chiefs, interior ministers, army commanders, and the heads of the ultra-influential intelligence services. Because of his positions against Islamic fundamentalism and his diplomacy towards Israel, Mubarak was the target of repeated assassination attempts. According to the BBC, Mubarak survived 6 attempts on his life. In June 1995, there was an alleged assassination attempt involving noxious gases and Egyptian Islamic Jihad while Mubarak was in Ethiopia for a conference of the Organization of African Unity. Upon his return, Mubarak is said to have authorized bombings on Al-Gamar al-Islamiyya settlements, which by 1999 had seen 20,000 persons placed in detention related to the revolutionary Islamic organizations. He was also reportedly injured by a knife-wielding assailant in Port Said in September 1999. Stance on the invasion of Iraq in 2003. President Mubarak spoke out against the 2003 Iraq War, arguing that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict should have been resolved first. He also said the war would cause 100 bin Ladens. However, as president he did not support an immediate U.S. withdrawal from Iraq because he believed it would probably lead to chaos. 2005 elections. President Mubarak was re-elected by majority votes in a referendum for successive terms on 4 occasions. In 1987, 1993, and 1999, no other candidates could run against the president because a restriction in the Egyptian constitution in which the People's Assembly played the main role in electing the president of the republic. After increased domestic and international pressure for democratic reform in Egypt, Mubarak asked Parliament on 26 February 2005 to amend the constitution to allow multi-candidate presidential elections by September 2005. Previously, Mubarak secured his position by having himself nominated by Parliament then confirmed without opposition in a referendum. The September 2005 ballot was a multiple-candidate election rather than a referendum, but the electoral institutions and security apparatus remain under the control of the president. On 28 July 2005, Mubarak announced his candidacy. The election was scheduled for 7 September 2005. According to civil organizations that observed the election, it was marred by mass rigging activities. In a move widely seen as political persecution, Ayman Noor, a dissident and candidate for the El-Ghad party, was convicted of forgery and sentenced to 5 years hard labor on 24 December 2005. State corruption during Mubarak's presidency while in office. Political corruption in the Mubarak administration's Ministry of the Interior rose dramatically. Political figures and young activists were imprisoned without trial. Illegal, undocumented, hidden detention facilities were established, and universities, mosques, and newspaper staff were rejected because of political inclination. Military officers were allowed to violate citizens' privacy using unconditioned arrests under Egypt's emergency law. In 2005, Freedom House, a non-governmental organization that conducts research into democracy, reported that the Egyptian government under Mubarak expanded bureaucratic regulations, registration requirements, and other controls that often feed corruption. Freedom House said, corruption remained a significant problem under Mubarak, who promised to do much, but in fact never did anything significant to tackle it effectively. In 2010, Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index report assessed Egypt with a CPI score of 3.1, based on perceptions of the degree of corruption from business people and country analysts, with 10 being very clean and 0 being highly corrupt. Egypt ranked 98th out of the 178 countries included in the report. Wealth and allegations of personal corruption. In February 2011, ABC News reported that experts believe the personal wealth of Mubarak and his family was between $40 billion and $70 billion from military contracts made during his time as an Air Force officer. The Guardian reported that Mubarak and his family might be worth up to $70 billion garnered from corruption, bribes and legitimate business activities. The money was said to be spread out in various bank accounts, including some in Switzerland and the UK, and invested in foreign property. The newspaper said some of the information about the family's wealth might be 10 years old. According to Newsweek, these allegations are poorly substantiated and lack credibility. On 12 February 2011, the government of Switzerland announced it was freezing the Swiss bank accounts of Mubarak and his family. On 20 February 2011, the Egyptian prosecutor general ordered the freezing of Mubarak's assets and those of his wife Suzanne, his sons Alaa and Gamal Mubarak, and his daughters-in-law Heidi Rasek and Khadija Gamal. The prosecutor general also ordered the Egyptian foreign minister to communicate this to other countries where Mubarak and his family could have assets. This order came 2 days after Egyptian newspapers reported that Mubarak filed his financial statement. Egyptian regulations mandate government officials to submit a financial statement listing their assets and sources of income while performing government work. On 21 February 2011, the Egyptian Military Council, which was temporarily given the presidential authorities following the 25 January 2011 revolution, said it had no objection to a trial of Mubarak on charges of corruption. On 23 February 2011, the Egyptian newspaper El Dostor reported that a knowledgeable source described the order of the prosecutor general to freeze Mubarak's assets and the threats of illegal action as nothing but a signal for Mubarak to leave Egypt after a number of attempts were made to encourage him to leave willingly. In February 2011, Voice of America reported that Egypt's top prosecutor had ordered a travel ban and an asset freeze for Mubarak and his family as he considered further action. On 21 May 2014, a Cairo court convicted Mubarak and his sons of embezzling the equivalent of $17.6 million of state funds which were allocated for renovation and maintenance of presidential palaces but were instead diverted to upgrade private family homes. The court ordered the repayment of $17.6 million, fined the trio $2.9 million, and sentenced Mubarak to 3 years in prison and each of his sons to 4 years. presidential succession in 2009, U.S. Ambassador Margaret Scobie said, despite incessant whispered discussions, no one in Egypt has any certainty about who will eventually succeed Mubarak nor under what circumstances. She said presidential son Gamal Mubarak was the most likely successor. Some thought intelligence chief Omar Suleiman might seek the office, or Arab League Secretary General Amr Moussa might stand. President Mubarak and his son denied this. They said, a multi-candidate electoral system introduced in 2005 has made the political process more transparent. Nigerian Tribune journalist Abiodun Awolaja described a possible succession by Gamal Mubarak as a hereditary pseudo-monarchy. The National Democratic Party of Egypt continued to state that Hosni Mubarak was to be the party's only candidate in the 2011 presidential election. Mubarak said on 1 February 2011 that he had no intention of standing in the 2011 presidential election. When this declaration failed to ease the protests, Mubarak's vice president stated that Gamal Mubarak would not run for president. With the escalation of the demonstration and the fall of Mubarak, Hamdi El Sayed, a former influential figure in the National Democratic Party, said Gamal Mubarak intended to usurp the presidency, assisted by then Interior Minister Habib El Adly. Israeli-Palestinian conflict during his presidency, Mubarak upheld the U.S. brokered Camp David Accords treaty signed between Egypt and Israel in 1978. Mubarak, on occasion, also hosted meetings relating to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and made a number of attempts to serve as a broker between them. Mubarak was concerned that Rabbi Menahem M. Schneerson didn't trust him on the issue and considered meeting him in New York. In October 2000, Mubarak hosted an emergency summit meeting at Sharm el-Sheikh to discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In attendance were U.S. President Bill Clinton, PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, King Abdullah of Jordan, NATO Sec. General Javier Solana, and UN Sec. General Kofi Annan. Mubarak was involved in the Arab League, supporting Arab efforts to achieve a lasting peace in the region. At the Beirut summit on 28 March 2002, the League adopted the Arab Peace Initiative, a Saudi-inspired plan to end the Arab-Israeli conflict. In June 2007, Mubarak held a summit meeting at Sharm el-Sheikh with King Abdullah II of Jordan, President Mahmoud Abbas and Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. On 19 June 2008, the Egypt-brokered pause in hostilities between Israel and Hamas went into effect. According to the New York Times, neither side fully respected the terms of the ceasefire. The agreement required Hamas to end rocket attacks on Israel and to enforce the ceasefire throughout Gaza. In exchange, Hamas expected the blockade to end, commerce in Gaza to resume, and truck shipments to be restored to 2005 levels. Israel tied an easing of the blockade to a reduction in rocket fire and gradually reopened supply lines and permitted around 90 daily truck shipments to enter Gaza. Hamas criticized Israel for its continued blockade, while Israel accused Hamas of continued weapons smuggling via tunnels to Egypt and pointed to continued rocket attacks. In 2009, Mubarak's government banned the Cairo anti-war conference, which had criticized his lack of action against Israel.